Greetings from Zone 7A here in Worcester, North Carolina. Today we're going to be continuing on with part 2 of the garden tour here on the southeastern section of the house. I've got 2 main beds and just a few other plants dotted about that we'll take a look at. So let's get started. Alright, in this small little bed here, this is a Lesbedeza, little volcano Lesbedeza. I planted this last fall and it overwintered nicely. Looks like it's about 14 inches tall and spreading really good. Believe it or not, when this thing peaks out, probably take a couple of years I guess, but it will get ultimately about 8 to 10 foot tall and about 10 to 12 foot wide. It's really large, and the thing is, it's herbaceous. It will die back to the ground every year, and it'll have such a root system in a couple of years that it will get that large before the season's over. It has pea-like blooms every fall, and it did actually bloom last year. Don't really believe that's any buds on it yet. It's a little bit early. It has pea-like blooms every fall, purple, and it did attract a few small type pollinators last year. Okay, continuing on right up here. I've got 2 different spireas, and so far they've failed to attract any pollinators. Obviously this one hasn't because it's not bloomed yet, but I see people, this is a double play red spirea. I guess it's called double play because it kind of a reblooming spirea. This double play red spirea here, and over in that small bed is an Anthony Waterer spirea. I planted both of these last fall and they overwintered. Again, like the little volcano, they overwintered really nicely. The Anthony Waterers bloomed quite a bit this year. No pollinators, which is actually surprising because I see people, I see spireas on YouTube with just crawling with bees, so I don't know what the deal is. One of the ones I see crawling is with bees is a little princess spirea, which I don't have. But there is a native spirea that they don't have the, see here, this has got kind of a flattish top bloom. The native spireas have a different form of bloom that's not flat top like that. We'll start with this bed right here. It's dominated really by the Verbena bonariensis. There's somewhere around, I think I counted 16 of them in here. And like I mentioned on the previous video, I'm really surprised that they overwintered. I had no idea that the Verbena bonariensis would overwinter here in Zone 7A, which I'm actually really glad they did, especially since the next bed I show you, I'll have some plants in it, some Augustache, some hot lips, and cherry Augustache, which did not overwinter too well. I lost about 75% of those plants, so we got a few holes in that other bed, but they'll wind up filling in with various things. Mexican sunflower for one, which I planted over there. All right, we'll just start at one end and go to the other. This is a Kramer's Rote heather. The first thing to bloom this year is this little low down coniferous looking mound of heather. Didn't attract a single pollinator this spring. Right over here, I don't know why this is so small when the other 2 are not. This is a bottlebrush plant, and I'll show you another example of it here. This is also a bottlebrush plant right here, which is probably close to 2 foot tall. Not the one in the pot. The thing in the pot is just a grapevine. That's a Candace grapevine. I'll talk more about my grapevines later. But right there is a bottlebrush plant, about 2 foot tall. I have one more of those. Got a small Show Creek Vitex here. Right here is a dead Fothergilla. It bloomed this year in a different spot, and then I got the bright idea, well, you know, I don't really like it in this spot. I'm going to move it. So I did a great job, and this was early before it got hot, and I moved this thing from one spot to right here. Got, as far as I'm concerned, every single root there was, and it just died. It just gave up the ghost big time right after that. Dwarf butterfly bush, one of the best series. I'm not even going to spend much time on those. Those are arabesque penstemon, not doing so well. This is like I showed you out in the front on video 1. This is how they look after a full season. They just really have a million of these spires. Never saw a pollinator one on these. Okay, moving on here. We have 3 milkweed. As I say, I need to step up my game on my milkweed. I transplanted them to right here last year. Okay, this sort of bare spot here. I had something that died here. I can't remember what it was, but I have direct seeded some lacy Phacelia here. This is what a little bitty plant of lacy Phacelia looks like, and I think they will draw just all kind of pollinators. Not exactly the most attractive of plants, but kind of like borage. I think it's actually in the borage family, and they're supposed to attract lots of pollinators. Right here is some Culver's root. I have 3, 4, I've got 6 Culver's root right here. And it's just now starting. It's purple. Some of this Culver's root has a white bloom, also known as Veronicastrum. And this really is looking a lot better than it did last year when I set it out. So I'm looking for good things on the Culver's root. And this plant here, you know, I've shown you the standing cypress, which forms a rosette the first season like this, and then in the second season it will just shoot up a spire kind of like this. Assuming this is standing cypress, which I believe it to be, it will bloom. This one will bloom in one season for some reason. There is another plant, an obnoxious plant, which looks similar to this, which is called dog fennel, which if that turns out to be dog fennel, it will be gone in a heartbeat. I'll rip it out of here. But hopefully this is standing cypress. I'll know before the year's over. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 Scabiosa, pink mist Scabiosa. And they've gone through various periods of time of looking good and looking really scraggly, so scraggly that I wanted to pull them out. And they wound up looking pretty good. They have found their spot. This is actually also called pincushion flower. Okay, here is a fairly large lilac. It's about 4 foot tall right at the moment, and it did bloom this year. And this is also a transplant from somewhere else a couple of years ago, and it looked horrible for a couple of years, and now it's really looking good. Looked so good, in fact, that the deer, I suppose it was the deer, thought that they would sample on it. It is a little surprising that they would sample, you know, a twig that large. That's like a pretty good sized pencil right there. One, this is like almost 2 pencils right here, 2, 3. They must not have really liked it because they did that one day, one night, and then they just quit. And here's my best example of a bottle brush plant. This thing here is 3 foot tall now. And this first day, excitement, it has a bloom on top. So there you go. Bottle brush plant. I'll put the scientific name right there. Okay, another Shoal Creek Vitex. Here's something new. From Lowe's this year, they had bags of peonies, peony tubers. This one said canary and Bartzella peonies. And you can see the foliage structure on this one. I don't know if this is the Bartzella, and this other one right here has a different foliage structure. So I did get both of them to come up. I had this one here does not look too good. I don't know what's happening there. I do have a lot of bud, even though it don't look good. Look at there, I've got another one coming up right beside it. I mean, it's sending out a shoot, in other words. And this one here has a bloom. By all rights, the gardener in me knows that on a young plant like this that's blooming, I probably should take that bloom out so the plant will get stronger. But being how this is the first year I've planted peonies and my first bloom, I want to see what it looks like, so I'm not going to take it out. Okay, right here I have Liatris spicata, otherwise known as gay feathers. This is one of the better ones here. This is another standing, no, that's not the stand, that's another gay feathers. They look different. Even though these look different, they're the same plant. So I planted these from bulbs at Lowe's. I got a bag with 30 bulbs in them for 10 bucks. And you know what? I think every single one of them came up. There's a couple less than 30 plants here, but that's just because some critter has decided I had too many plants, basically. So there you go. More of the standing cypress. Hopefully, now this one here is expanded quite a bit. And I really do think this is standing cypress and not dog fennel from my previous experience, because I did see some bloom last year. But this is coming in one season. It's strange. I scattered seed over here in this bed last fall. Right here is an echinacea. This is a straight species of echinacea, Echinacea purpureum, and it's about 10 inches tall. I grew it from seed last year. I had about 30 nice plants here, just about as many plants as what you see on this Liatris, and the squirrels just ate down all year long. I guess I could have got up a little more energy and put a fence around it or something, but I didn't. And this is the only one that survived the winter, unfortunately. We have here a hardy hibiscus. I've got two where the foliage looks a little bit the same. This is 2 foot tall. I've got a Mars Madness and a Midnight Marvel. So this one here is one of the other, Mars Madness or Midnight Marvel. Another one right here, hardy hibiscus, Prince Charming. It's quite a bit smaller. I'll walk into the bed here momentarily. Right here this is one of the purple giant hyssopus I've got dotted about. And there's the Hyperium higcoat. We went over it already. I've got a pair of them there and a couple of them there. They're looking really nice, but as I say, pollinator wise, get out of town. They're just not that great. Well, there's zero. There's one thing I didn't really explain on the last video of them. This is a oddity here. All right, you see this blossom here. I'm gonna disturb those stamens or whatever you want to call them there in the center, and you'll see what at first seems to be pollen, but it's not pollen. It's a whole bunch of tiny little bugs running around. Oops, I think I got more than I bargained for on that one. There's a spider eating the little tiny bugs. All right, here is my arbor made from cattle panels and T-poles. like seems to be very popular these days on YouTube. I've got grapevines, 4 grapevines on this arbor. 1, 2, 3, 4, which pretty much I thought died over the winter. Even last year, all last year they looked horrible. We'd had so much rain, but they're looking pretty good this year. The one over there had to come back all the way from the ground, and these two are kind of medium-ish plants. I cannot remember the names of them. However, this one here, which is doing so well, and I've had to tie up, and it's oh man, this right side there, that's approaching 5 feet tall. That is a Candace grape. It came from, it's just a little cheap grape vine from Walmart. Planted last year to replace one which actually did die right here. This little center bed here, and I meant to leave enough room here for a big riding lawnmower. Didn't quite get it done because the riding lawnmower we have is fairly large. But anyway, this is Sonic Bloom Pink Weigelia. I have 3 of them at each corner. And this is a Baptisia. This is a Royal Candelabra Baptisia. And the no foliage on the bottom is how this one is designed or bred. Or at least it wound up with no foliage on the bottom, and now it's a feature. So that's not a bug your computer program has, that's a feature. So there you go. Anyway, it winds up being good because whenever it's going to get to be a large plant. It's herbaceous, dies all the way back to the ground, starts every year, and after it's been in a few seasons, it could get like 6, 7 foot tall, and the bottom couple of feet will be bare, which is good because I've got the Weigelia that will eventually kind of meld together here at the bottom, and this will be sticking out of the middle of it. Okay, let's continue on this bed. I'm just going on too long here, I know. This plant here is a form of dwarf ironweed. The Latin name is, and it's really looking pretty healthy. Here is the other hardy hibiscus, either Mars Madness or Midnight Marvel, one of the two. It's looking very healthy. There's a Caryopteris. Here is a butterfly bush. I think that pretty much covers this bed. As I say, the predominant feature of this bed is the 16 or so Verbena bonariensis. If it was early in the day and sunshine nice and bright on it, there would be a fair number of butterflies on these right now. Alright, moving on to the other large bed here. This was a wild and woolly bed last year with all of the Augustache. It had just a ton of hot lips and maraschino cherry Augustache. I would say 75, maybe 80% of my Augustache died in this bed over the winter, and it was not a bad winter. So it doesn't bode well probably for the remaining plants, but maybe they'll have a better root system, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, let me show you a difference between, if you're ever wondering the difference, form difference between May-night salvia and the Blue Hills salvia. These two plants here are May-nights. Alright, we got fairly large leaves and fairly long bloom spires right here. Then I'm going to zoom in on 3 Blue Hills right over here. This is Blue Hill salvia, and the leaf structure is smaller on the Blue Hills, and the blooms are shorter on the Blue Hills. As far as which one I like best, it's very difficult to say. The Blue Hills, probably the May-night at its best. is a more spectacular plant than the Blue Hills, but there's the rub at its best. It's not, here at least, it's not at its best as much as the Blue Hills is at its best. The Blue Hills is at its best every season for quite a long time. And if we have this huge rain dump that we have here sometime, like 10 inches in a week, these will suffer. These will just kind of rot almost. They'll come back because this is actually a well-drained bed, but even in a well-drained bed, they suffer mightily when you have just a monsoon type of rain. But other than that, you know, I like them both. Here is another Baptisia. This is a yellow bombshell Baptisia. Now, even though it's kind of bare at the bottom, it's not like the candelabra. When it gets big and all, it will wind up with foliage all the way from top to bottom. Okay, this is a Mexican sunflower, which is kind of what I used to fill in my holes that got created when my agastache died in this bed. I kind of needed a place for my Mexican sunflower. I plant them for the monarchs, for the migrating monarchs in the fall. And most of my Mexican sunflower is not quite 2 foot tall. It's probably about 1.5 feet tall right now, but it's looking really, really good. Okay, there's a few milkweed that I planted. I planted both swamp milkweed and Asclepias tuberosa, the butterfly weed. I think this is the Asclepias tuberosa in here. It's a little bit hard to say because I got all scrambled up on my labeling. Right here is some Russian sage. Actually, believe it or not, this is the best this looked. It's traveled from one place to another, and by traveled I don't mean it has spread, which although it did spread from there to there, but this is like its 4th different place I've been searching for it to do good. I know it's like a 3 or 4 year old plant, and it should be like taking over the world right now. Should have spread that much, but it's had kind of a hard life. But maybe it's found its spot. Sometimes when you have a plant and move it enough and it finds it, so you'll either kill it moving it so much, or it'll find its spot and do well, which I think that's what's happened. This is some of the agastache, which did make it. Like there's 4 plants right here. This one, I don't have many examples of the maraschino cherry, but I'm pretty sure this is the maraschino cherry agastache. Right here. Although the hot lips, when early in the season when they first open, they're also fairly red, but I've never had any of that solid red on the hot lips. It's always got some white on it. This is a recent purchase to fill in a hole. This is just Rudbeckia goldstrum right here. Moving on, right up there is the best catnip I've ever had. Catmint. That's the Walker's Low catmint, and it has attracted quite a number of pollinators. I'm well pleased with how it's done this year. And right there is my largest Shoal Creek Vitex. It's probably 4 foot tall, so I'm hoping that it really does good. Here is Arabesque penstemon. This is the best clump of penstemon that I've ever had so far, and right now the penstemon is in not my penalty box, but it's on probation because it's not been not done very well as far as attracting pollinators. I've got this one in the rock candy penstemon, but I'm going to try a few more breeds of it because it's purported to be so good. I really want to try a red riding head penstemon, but we shall see. Moving on, this is a type of coneflower here, Tennessee coneflower. The proper name is, and last year the rabbits kept it mowed down, but this year they have not, which is surprising because we're keeping my asters in front mowed down that they didn't mow down before. And I wish I could give you a positive identification on this plant. The best I can come up with is Violet Mirage Salvia, and it is taller than May Night or Blue Hills. The spires are thinner, but they are a much deeper purple, a violet purple. At any rate, the bottom line on the salvia is the bees have taken a liking to it. Last year they did not, this year they have. It just needed a bigger plant is all they needed to really like it. These I transplanted from the middle of the bed because they are dwarf butterfly bushes. These died all the way back to the ground over the winter, and as you can see, they're really nice and bushy right now. I have not trimmed them this year to make them this bushy. This is just how they come out. So, well, yeah, I did trim one or two little scraggly pieces off of them early in the season, but they're looking great. All right, let me turn around here. I've already did one video on this garden edge in here. This is, so I'll update, this is the native species of arrowwood viburnum. Really didn't bloom much, but you know, I got it after it bloomed. It's looking really good. This is the sparkler viburnum, looking pretty good. It had a lot of bloom stalks on it. These blooms were really kind of disappointing. Yeah, they're just all crumbling off now if you do this to them. But they were very disappointing. They didn't last long. I never saw a single bee on them. And you do need 2 viburnum arrowwoods to cross-pollinate and create berries. So I really doubt that will have berries. I don't really care when they're this little anyway. If they have berries, it wouldn't be that many. But in the backyard, I have the Chicago luster viburnum, which the leaves on it are amazing looking in comparison to these. They're just much glossier, much more healthier looking leaves. And I just thought I'd splice this little bit in here. This is the Chicago luster viburnum, which, just look at this. This is a great looking plant. If the sun was a little bit brighter here, you just really see the foliage shining on this thing. But it is super healthy looking foliage. Just a great looking plant. The Chicago luster viburnum. As I say, you need another viburnum for it to set berries. So if you're only going to plant one of these arrowwood viburnums, and got a choice between native, well, you know, I'm always going to kind of lean toward you ought to plant the native. Politically, you ought to plant the native, but I tell you what, the Chicago luster is really a great looking viburnum. So there you go. Personally, even though I try to plant them mostly natives, I would plant the Chicago luster if I was only planting one viburnum. Okay, let's moving on. Mexican sunflower, a couple of examples of those. And here we have the Augustache, not the blue boa Augustache, but the blackadder Augustache. This stand here is done really well, and it attracts loads of pollinators. Here's a different view of the Walker's Low, which that's absolutely the best I've ever done on the stand of catnip of any kind, which right now I think the Walker's Low is the only kind I've got. And right here has only just now started to draw a few pollinators. This is 2 clumps of the, see, one's farther along than the other bloom-wise, but 2 clumps of lavender. I planted these from seed 2 years ago, and right now they're about 14 inches tall, and this clump's probably 14 inches wide, 16 inches wide. This clump is probably 2 foot wide. But it said all the seed said on it was just true lavender. So I don't know any scientific name or anything, just the seed said true lavender. Okay, moving on. Right here is something called royal catchfly. It's supposed to have red blooms, send up some stalks with red blooms, good for hummingbirds. I can attest to that because mine's not ever bloomed, but this is just in its second full season here. And here definitely is some hot lips salvia, and it does come out mostly red. And there, see, you've got the white on it. Later in the season, this will turn to pretty much all white with just maybe a bare hint of red. So I still do have a little bit of my hot lips and maraschino cherry salvia in this bed. I would say that's it for this tour, but on the way back to the house here, we'll look at one or two other little items. Oh yeah, and I totally revamped this area here. It had the two azaleas. See, that's two azaleas right now and two rhododendrons. The rhododendrons don't look like much because I transplanted them, and I took out two boxwoods. It looks just drastically better than what it did with the two boxwoods in there. I just didn't like the boxwoods because they didn't bloom. The boxwoods looked okay, but I'm not a fan of boxwoods at all. Yeah, if you had a place where you really wanted to create a hedge, fine. Otherwise, no. All right, here is a camellia, April Trist camellia. Has super glossy leaves on it. This is a good side to look at. The other side doesn't look quite as good. This side gets more sun, so maybe that's why this side looks pretty good. This thing's it's 6.5 foot tall, maybe 7 foot tall. All right, over here is a general Sikorsky clematis. It looks kind of ratty on the bottom for some reason. Has all year, but look at there. That looks great. No pollinators, of course, but yeah, it's slightly past its peak, but not too far past its peak. Right down here is some sort of azalea. It's a dwarf form of azalea. Here is some pentas. These pentas are supposed to get 2 foot tall, and I overwintered them. I said, you know, they didn't do anything last year. I said, well, I'll overwinter them, and next year they'll get 2 foot tall. They're not going to do it, and they're just going to remain like 5 inches tall or something like that. Right here is something I planted from seed, Eastern Red Columbine, and they didn't have time to bloom this year because I grew them from seed and they're just not that mature of a plant. So they are doing quite nicely though. This is a Mahonia, soft crest Mahonia. Supposedly it'll bloom practically in the dead of winter and have yellow blooms. And we'll see. It didn't last year, but it was a new planting last year. And over here is Appletini heuchera, or heucherella, one of the two. And a nice pretty plant to brighten up some dark shade. And this here is sending out just a little bit of a red plume of flowers. So that's pretty much it from Zone 7, North Carolina. So long, everybody. Okay, and these are my back deck plants. The reason I'm showing them is because they're actually doing better back here than they are out in my regular garden. So this here is a status plant, S-T-A-T-I-C-E. It will wind up sending shoots up through the middle. You can see right there is one of the shoots it will send. Not sure exactly how long it will get, but being how this plant's pretty large, it'll probably be 1 foot tall, and it'll have red blooms. I'm hoping some kind of pollinator will like it. Here is a cigar plant, looking pretty good. Here is a Salvia darcii. I had to tie it up to give it some support there, as you can see. One good thing about these perennials, the first year you set them out, even if the tops of them are misshapen and can't support themselves or whatever, whenever they die, you need to just resist the urge to trim them back lots of times, to let them send some strength down into the roots, and then the next year they'll hopefully, after they die back all the way down, if it's a herbaceous perennial, hopefully they'll die back all the way back down and come back out and make for a much better plant the next season. Here is a red feathers echium. Don't know much about this plant, planted it from seed. This is the only one that came up. so I'll be overwintering it probably, since I've only got the one example of it. Here is a what's called a stock plant, and this is the best example. I've planted this at numerous places out in the garden. It really has not done as well as this one, and even this one has pulled in 0 pollinators, so I won't be planting this one again. You can see the blooms. It's sort of pea type of blooms, very similar to pea plants. But continuing on, this is 3 plants in a kind of a long planter here called this is a candy corn plant. It's a little later than I would like for it to be starting, but it's just now going to start to bloom. But if you buy these from anywhere as a small plant early in the season, it will be it'll be getting close to frost before they wind up blooming. These were overwintered, so they're a little bit, they're quite a bit ahead of that. But I'm behind what I was last year on them. Last year I had plants twice this big. I don't know what exactly happened. And this here is a very good example of Bolero hummingbird mint. And I have saw the hummingbirds on it a little bit, not as much as what I would like to. However, don't read too much into that, because the hummingbirds this year have been few and far between. I think they've really taken up a residence somewhere else and only visit us about twice a day is kind of what's happening. On a normal season we would have at least 1 pair that hang around very close to here and would, eat 15 times in 30 minutes. You would just see them come and go, but not this year. Here's a new type of hummingbird feeder, the top-down feeder, I guess you call it. And I really like it because you can see the hummingbirds all the way around the perimeter of it. However, I haven't had many hummingbirds. Okay, that's pretty much it for the back deck plants.